a bit of a communications mess it has been.
Yeah, well, Hugh O'Connell has an article in today's Sunday Independent, and the headline that goes with it is "Another Fine Mess." And it really is another fine mess. This government have gotten into the habit of making a number of messes, particularly around appointments. We can go way back to Seamus Wolfe's appointment to the Supreme Court. That was mired in controversy. We then had the Katherine Zappone issue that none of them seemed to learn anything about in terms of how you make an appointment. And then you had Robert Watt, who was involved in this story, but also Robert Watt's own salary when he was made Secretary General. So there's a huge amount of mistakes coming around it. The Sunday Times have a story around it that they're saying, well, it seems that the payment for Tony Holohan, which was part of the major issue, wasn't going to come from the coffers of the state at all. Now, that's not actually what the piece really says. The piece says they hadn't figured it out. And I think this is a classic example of a government making, or a department making, an announcement when they hadn't got the obvious questions figured out and the answers to those obvious questions figured out, which is they didn't know who was going to pay him. And I think that's daft, and they hadn't obviously learned anything from their previous mistakes.
There's an arrogance to it, wasn't there?
There is, but there is a certain arrogance to it. That is words that are certainly being used to describe Robert Watt's style. Robert Watt, we have to remember, came with a reputation of getting things done. He had been highly effective in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, where he managed to get his arms around the finances of the state. But unfortunately for him, and unfortunately for the Department of Health, he hasn't seemed to have made such an impact when he made that appointment. And in fact, what he is coming across as, certainly is what he's being accused of, is being arrogant in front of Oireachtas committees and having a level of arrogance and disregard for his minister, because it does put Stephen Donnelly in a very awkward position as well.
In terms of Tony Holohan, the Sunday Indo, Jan is saying that he feels ultimately the political system did not support him. What does it do for his legacy, this whole mess? What does it do for
It's really hard, isn't it? It's hard to see him go. I mean, when you think how revered he was at the beginning of the pandemic, and everybody was looking to Tony Holohan for advice and support, and what he said, what went, and that we kind of felt a comfort in the advice he was given, that he was handling it. I know the tone and feelings towards him changed as things progressed over the couple of years, and as people maybe became a little bit frustrated with restrictions and perhaps the Conservative approach. But now he's leaving, he said, because he doesn't feel supported, or the suggestion is he doesn't feel supported by the political system. It's a real tarnish on him, isn't it? When the Taoiseach decided to put the move on hold, that seemed to have been enough for him to decide now that he wasn't going to take up the position and that he was going to leave the public service altogether. And it sees him leaving, really, I suppose, a really bad taste in his mouth. It's a sad ending to...
But this is a role that was needed.
That is, yeah,
it
exactly.
actually is very much needed. You don't have anybody who's guiding the future of public health in Ireland. He would be expertly positioned to do that.
And Trinity have said there's going to be a huge loss, and they said they can't afford to pay him. But they've said it's a huge loss for students, it's a huge loss for the education sector. And it is, I mean, you would have to wonder, is it a little bit short-sighted going forward to the future? Like you said, it's something that we're going to need. What we've been told, this wasn't the big one. That fear is still there as we still kind of live with the remnants of the pandemic. But the idea that we could be in this situation again, this isn't, it's to go into something and not take lessons from it, and not prepare for the next occasion, and not put ourselves in the best possible position for it. It's a big loss. It is for education. Yeah.